Hi, welcome to One Eye on the Page. I am Scott. It is another vlog week. I've completed 3 books this week, so let's get into it. But first of all, I have to include a book that I finished the previous week, but for whatever reason, I didn't include it in the vlog. It is Smith in the City by P.G. Wodehouse that I read for the purposes of the podcast that I do with my daughter Robin. This is the one book this month that I have read previously, and I knew what I was getting into. But of course, since we do a podcast about P.G. Wodehouse now, we get a little bit more in depth on it and reading more in depth and taking notes and talking back and forth with Robin. My feelings about the book sometimes change. I think I like the book more when I read it last time than I did this time. And a lot of that has to do with the character of Smith. Much like I talked about Anne in the Anna Green Gables series, Anne, who I liked in the first 2 books, I really disliked in the third book. Smith, well, I didn't really like him in the first book, but he's really intolerable in this book. Mike Jackson, his friend, is great, and I wish we got more of them, and I especially wish that because I know there are 2 more Smith books in our future, and Mike plays very little part in either of them. So basically, both Mike and Smith have left school and they're looking forward to college. Situations change and they end up having to work in a bank, or Mike has to work in a bank, and Smith ends up in the bank. And a lot of it is about their life in the bank and also Smith's battle of wits with the bank manager, which he pretty much just decides that he's going to do. I compared that to the Roadrunner and Wile E. Coyote. Wile E. Coyote is supposed to be the bad guy, but I really just can't stand the Roadrunner, or Tom and Jerry, or whatever. There's a bad guy and then there's a good guy, but nothing bad ever happens to him. Something bad always happens to the bad guy, and the good guy is always a little smarmy, and I don't like him, and that's what I got with Smith. And although there was plenty of Mike in this book, I would say it was probably about half and half. But not only did we get half Smith, but we got the worst qualities of Smith, and they were also turned on Mike. And if you're being a dick to Mike, then you're just a dick. Um, I gave this one 3 stars. Robin gave it 2.5 stars, which is the lowest score she's given to any Woodhouse book, including The Pot Hunters, which I gave 2 stars to. So that was one that I had missed in previous vlogs giving a rating to. So now I'm going to talk about the 3 books that I have read this week. The first book I finished was Giant's Bread by Agatha Christie. This is Agatha Christie writing as Mary Westmacott. It's not a mystery. When I first heard of Mary Westmacott, I was under the impression that she wrote romance books. And relationships do play a huge part in these, but I would not call them romance books. If I had known that before, I probably would have read them sooner. I don't know that I would have read all of them, as I am planning to, mainly because I'm doing a 5-year battle, Agatha Christie. So I have to read all the Mary Westmacott books. There are 6 of them. Giant Spread is about uh, Vernon Dare, who basically he grows up. This is like in the late 1800s, early 1900s, up to and a little bit past World War One. So we meet him when he's a very young boy, and then as he gets older, uh, he dislikes music, but then goes to a concert when he's 20, 21, and is kind of floored by it and decides he's going to be a composer. And as I stated in my end of month review, if you're wanting to learn anything about his music, how he picked up music at the age of 20 or 21 and learned instruments or composing, you're not going to get that. You it's not a big part of this. It's basically it's almost a coming of age, somewhat of a romance. He has essentially 2 options as far as that goes. But and I know I'm repeating myself here as far as what I've said in the end of month. Mainly, it's a book full of characters from Agatha Christie mysteries, except without the mystery. Agatha Christie mysteries without the mystery is just full of people you wouldn't want to be around. It's fine when they're killing each other or being accused of murder or being suspicious, but when they're just people living their normal everyday lives, I'm not particularly interested. There are 2 characters that I think Agatha Christie kind of holds above the other characters, Jane and Sebastian. And I honestly, I think I dislike them more than any of the other characters in there just because they are the type of people who you kind of expect. I'm just being honest here. And, it's like, no, you're just being an asshole. And so this one I would give 2.5 stars to, quite honestly. Not a great book. Fortunately for me, the remaining Westmacott books are shorter than this one. This one was like 425 pages or so. It was a long one for an Agatha Christie book. Next, I finished an author many of us are familiar with, but a book you are almost certainly not. It is Stephen King, Hearts in Suspension. This comes from the University of Maine publishing. It is about the 60s, especially about 60s at the University of Maine, Orono, which I'm probably mispronouncing how Maine people say it. Uh, it contains a long essay by Stephen King, as well as his novella, Hearts in Atlantis, which is set in the 60s at a college. So there's definitely some autobiographical elements to it, as you can see from the rest of this book. Some of the things that are happening in the novella also are taken from his college life then. His roommate in the novella is a in a pre-dentist program, as was his roommate in real life. And a lot of the characters in his life are kind of mirror images of the people that were around during that time. In addition to his essay and the novella, there are articles that he wrote when he was a college student, King's Garbage Truck in the student newspaper. I believe there are like 4 or 5 articles in there. You can kind of see a little bit of what King's writing style is going to be like, but also, quite honestly, the writing style is like you look at that and you go, "Oh yeah, that's from the '60s." It seems quite clear to me. There are also essays written by fellow students and one of his professors. So it's almost a companion piece to the Hearts in Atlantis book here, and of course the novella is in both of them. And I was thinking that I wasn't going to read the novella because I've already read it, but I ended up reading it anyway. So this is just really a landscape of the '60s and colleges, a particular college during the Vietnam War. And it's obviously it's not a time that I lived through, but it's it's nice to see it through the eyes of, in some ways, just average students. Not average, because almost all of them are in the English program and end up being writers or working in the publishing company, or you got one dentist, or you have a few that end up doing union work for up until now. It's very interesting. I'm probably going to give this a 4 star. I almost gave it a 4.5 star, and probably the only reason I didn't is just because Hearts in Atlantis was previously published. So I actually I read Hearts in Atlantis from the book Hearts in Atlantis rather than in this book, because the United States Postal Service lost this book for a little bit. So it's very good. It's a little bit expensive, and apparently it's only available in hardback. And I bought it through Amazon, but it was through Amazon through a store in Maine. So I think the copy I got was a little bit cheaper, because like when I thought I may have to reorder it because they had lost it, it was like $10 more what it showed available for me. If you are interested in that type of stuff, definitely pick it up. I assume that the proceeds that don't go to King probably go to the University of Maine, so it will help them. The third book that I finished was The Nickel Boys by Colson Whitehead, which is a novel. It's a novel that's based on real life events. The Nickel Boys is set mainly at the Nickel School, which is essentially a reformatory, and it's based on the Dozier School in Florida, which it was discovered after it had closed that there was like a secret graveyard, and then uh, details of killings and assaults, including you know SA, were happening. And it's also the tale of like all the students were going through this type of stuff, but also the black students uh, even had it worse than the white students. This was set mainly in the '60s, so right around the time of the civil rights movement, and it's essentially the tale of two boys there, Elwood Curtis and Jack Turner, and it's their time at the Nickel Academy. or the Nickel School. It's a hard book. I listened to it on audiobook, and I finished it up this morning while I was taking a walk. So I'm walking down a road that I usually walk down, and it was like 7 in the morning. And I'm in the last chapter and then the epilogue. And so I'm walking and got the annoying dogs that always bark at me because their owners want them to get run over by a car. And I'm crying. I don't usually cry at books, usually. But yeah, I was. This one is kind of like Ellie Vessel's Night in that it's going to be highly rated, and I'm probably not going to read it again. I'm glad I read it, but it's not something I necessarily want to go into again. So, yeah, I'm giving it a 5 star. It's an excellent book. I think everybody should read it, but also be in the emotional state to be able to read it. I don't tend to read darker material because just right now that's not what I'm looking for, usually not what I feel comfortable with. uh, it's a change in the past. I used to be able to read pretty dark stuff fine, but things change. uh, but if in it also, if you can't read it, there are articles about the Dozier School. You can find out about that information. It's not surprising information, but I think it's something that we need to remember. The, the 60s aren't that far away from us, and we all want to think that we've progressed quite a bit, um, but maybe not as much as we should have, not as much as we think we did. So, those are the books that I have finished. I am reading other books. I am reading as part of my Tolkien readathon. Eleanor Oliphant is Completely Fine by Gail Honeyman. It is interesting. Eleanor is the main character. She's also doing first person. Eleanor is, I assume, on the spectrum. I'm probably making a huge assumption there. Uh, so it's putting me into a world I'm not necessarily comfortable with. So I am enjoying it, but I'm trepidatious. So I'm also reading Pamela Burford's Undertaking Irene, which is a mystery sort of. I was a little bit off put by it at first because it was also written in first person, and I know a lot of people don't like first person. I don't generally have problems with first person, but it just depends about the approach. And this one was just like it wasn't a first person account. It was like a first person talking to me and demanding I listen, and honestly standing a little too close and like, hey. But I think after the first chapter, I've kind of gotten used to her voice. I don't know if the mystery is going to be particularly interesting, but we'll see. There's a dog, which dogs sometimes help. I am also, well, I just started Emma on audiobook. I have nothing to say about that. Emma, written by Jane Austen. I've listened to 5 minutes. As I said, I finished the Nickel Boys earlier today, so, but that is the next audiobook I am listening to. I have started. most of the other books that I have on my Tolkien readathon, but I haven't really progressed enough in any of them for me to really talk about them. I think the next one, and other than the ones I've already talked about, that I've progressed any bit in is Dog Stars, and I don't remember the author. I will edit it in here when I post this. I do not like the writing style. It seems like, well, I do believe the man has an MFA, as I do, so I'm casting stones. But it seems like the writing style of an MFA student who's like, look at me. Um, and also, the paragraphs don't have indentation. I know that's a weird thing to be annoyed by, but it does annoy me. But I think I'm less than 15 pages into it, I think. So we'll see. Just short, choppy sentences. For what reason? If you give me a reason, okay, but I don't see a reason. Is it just supposed to be because this guy is after like this flu hit everybody and killed most of the people that he's just uh, mentally not all there? Give me something. Otherwise, it just seems pretentious. But I'm not far enough in to be able to say that. I don't know why I did this. Well, I know why I did it. I don't know where I'm going to fit this in, but I also picked up um, a book that I don't know the name of. Well, I picked up a book by Julia Whelan, who is quite a prodigious audiobook reader, and also an actress. She was in Once and Again. She played Grace, which was a great show. It's not really streaming, which sucks because I'd like to watch that show again. I believe it only had 3 seasons. Uh, I believe the book was called Thank You for Listening. It is a romance, um, but it was one of those things where I saw somebody had a good review of it, and I liked her as an actress. I knew she had a good reputation as an audiobook reader, and I just got it. Haven't started it yet. So, also, in a couple of days, I should be getting Stephen King's book, Holly. It's released on the 5th, and I pre ordered it. I will probably start reading that fairly soon. Other than that, I think that is it. I'm trying not to read too many books at once, but that never turns out well for me. It was a banner moment for me last week when the only book I was reading was the Agatha Christie book. It's just a brief, shining, small moment in time that I enjoyed the books I read this week. I a 4 star and a 5 star and a 3 star, you know, and of course, well, a 4 star and a 5 star and a 2.5 star and a 3 star for Psmith in the City, which I had forgotten it last week. Until next week, that's it. Please like and subscribe, and I'll talk to you then.